Good morning. Good morning to all of you. I want to thank the Faculty Executive Committee for inviting me to speak. I want to congratulate Professor Tarasco for her election to serve this faculty as chair of the FEC. And of course, I want to welcome the Executive Vice Chancellor, Alexandra Logue, and University Dean Julia Quigley. I think it's important that we have this discussion today with Vice Chancellor Logue because Gen Ed, of course, is kind of our bread and butter here. We're not new to the concept. Years ago, our faculty identified and adopted Gen Ed objectives, and they continue to incorporate them in a variety of pedagogical strategies. And over the last several years, over 70 faculty have engaged in an interdisciplinary cohort group to really develop rubrics to assess the Gen Ed outcomes, learning outcomes, and I think the most important result, in addition to the benefit, obviously, to our students, is the emergence of the new faculty as leaders of faculty and as mentors to other faculty, which has been very inspiring for me to observe for a number of years. We have a very strong tradition and practice of shared governance here, particularly in the area of curriculum. So in response to that, one example certainly is this meeting, which was called as a faculty meeting, but also as a conference to explore this concept. Also, our Academic Senate established a special committee last month so that we can, as a community, examine general education and work with our colleagues throughout the campus on this important topic. Now, this conference program also includes presentations by a number of our colleagues on topics which really reflect the engagement of our faculty in activities to expand educational experiences of our students in and beyond the classroom, and often in collaboration with our community outside of our borders. So our presenters will demonstrate that education is much more than just communicating information. It really is gaining and applying the competencies we believe to be important through our Gen Ed objectives inside the classroom, through mentoring, and the engagement of our faculty to encourage students to be active learners. I think it's extraordinarily a hallmark of our institution. I'm very proud of what we do here. So at the end of the day, you contribute not just your knowledge, but also to support of students to develop a set of values which will certainly carry them through life. So I congratulate the faculty. As we've talked before, looking both ways, we had to say goodbye to a number of our faculty, and last night we honored the faculty who stepped into the ranks essentially of senior faculty, our tenured faculty. So congratulations to all of you. And I appreciate, again, Professor Tarasco's invitation to speak with you today. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Dr. Alexandra Logue. She's the Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost of the City University of New York, and she's held that position since 2008. She holds a doctorate in experimental psychology from Harvard, and her general research area is learning motivation, with special interests in choice behavior, self-control, that's a good one, and food aversions and preferences. We'll have to invite you back so you can talk about those things.
Everybody wants to.
She's internationally known as a behavioral scientist. Prior to her present position, she was the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at New York Institute of Technology, and she oversaw the initiation of several new undergraduate and graduate programs. At this time, she assumes responsibility, which is huge, for all of CUNY's academic programs, academic technology, enrollment management, faculty, libraries, and students. It's quite a job. And Chancellor Goldstein has chosen her to really be the presenter take the lead on this Gen Ed initiative, which some of us don't know too much about. And we're talking about it on all of the various campuses, and we're definitely interested in hearing some more about that. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Vice Chancellor Alexandra Logue.
But I can just use this. Can I use this? Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to use, I'll just use this.
You want to use that?
Yeah, I think it's okay. It's okay? You can hear me? Okay, great. First, let me say thank you so much for inviting me and Julia here today to speak with you. We really appreciate the opportunity. It gives us much better sense. I'm hoping we can have, I'll make a few introductory remarks, and then I'm hoping, even though as usual everybody is sort of located towards the back, that we can have some real question and answer, and have a real conversation. Because that's we need to exchange information and ideas and really talk. But I do want to thank the president and your chief academic officer, and also, as I understand it, Phil and Alex, who are the organizers of this event, for inviting us. Now, the title of your conference is Education Without Borders, something like that? Oh, there it is. Oh, okay. Expanding borders of the classroom. Okay, so that's a really good topic. It's really excellent that you have picked that topic at this particular time, because there's a lot of talk in, as you know, in higher education these days, that education is expanding in very many ways outside of the typical classroom and the typical setting that has been traditional. The Faculty Senate had a conference maybe a month or so ago about education in the prisons, which was an example of this, in the sense that the higher education occurring not within the traditional borders of traditional campuses. Very important for people who are incarcerated to be able to obtain education, because it gives them alternatives and choices of value after they finish their incarceration, to engage in behavior to obtain money that is not perhaps the behavior that got them into incarceration in the first place. Also, there's a lot of talk in recent years about experiential learning, and which also occurs often outside the classroom, and the learning that goes on in your campus, but not in the classroom. So, in student affairs services, in leadership positions that the students may have, even being on teams, the learning that goes on there. And in fact, there's a book that's been recently published, you may have heard of it, called Academically Adrift by Richard Aram, and we're studying it a lot in the central office because it's the result of a extensive analysis of data, which the author did to try to see how much students learn while they're in college and what's associated with that learning. And it turns out that one of the things he shows is that experiences the students have outside the classroom are very important in terms of the learning that the students get. And then, of course, we can't leave out hybrid and online education occurring, which is more and more. And frankly, at CUNY, we're behind in terms of this, but we're trying to catch up, and we're working hard at it. And all of these things involve, they all involve some kind of expert who's somewhere in some form, and also colleagues that you learn with, and also some kind of learning materials that you may use to help you learn. So there are all these things that are constant while the actual form and the modality of the learning is changing. And it's very important that we keep an open mind, because the students that are coming to us now, they're not learning in the ways that we all learned. They're learning in different sorts of situations with different kinds of technology. So this is a really good topic for your conference today. Now, what I also found interesting was a particular coincidence. The title of this, Expanding Borders of the Classroom. The President was talking about the General Education Initiative, which we actually, I guess we sort of more call it pathways, because it's general education, but it's also majors and electives and everything. And it's how to help students transfer more easily among the CUNY campuses. And we have a website that's about this initiative, which you may have seen, and if you haven't, I encourage you to go and look at it because there's an enormous amount of material on it, and I think it's very helpful. And I'll give you the address. It's a very easy address. It's www.cuny.edu/pathways. And the reason I'm bringing this up at this particular moment is that we have a place on there where you can write in and give your comments about what we're doing and thinking about, and we want to hear everybody's comments. And a student wrote in recently on this website, and it was a message about the problems the student had been having transferring and getting credits transferred. And the last thing that the student said in the message was, education should be without borders. So it fits right into the title of your conference, actually. And what the student was saying is, as I move around CUNY, it shouldn't be that I'm going from, territory A to territory B and that they're not joined. I should be able to cross these borders and be able to have my education count. And that's the difficulty that we have, is that many times the credits do transfer, but many times they don't. And I know that this is something that everyone in this room really cares about. And what we're trying to do is work together with everybody to try to figure out what's the best way to make it easier for the students. We have several basic principles, I will just be upfront about this, that we believe in the central office. One is that we believe that students should be able to move among the CUNY campuses as their interests and their needs change, but subject to the admission standards of the different colleges. But we also believe very deeply that we don't want all the campuses to be the same. We want each campus to have its own individuality, its own traditions, its own characteristics. We believe that we will work the best as a system if different campuses specialize in terms of the kinds of students they serve and the disciplines that they serve. That's the most efficient use of resources. Every campus can't be everything to everybody. That's just not going to work. You'd be spread too thin. We also know that New York State education law very clearly considers us one university with one board of trustees that has authority. And so within that whole context, you have to balance all these things. How do you balance the individuality of campuses and the creativity of individual campuses, which we want to preserve, and then the needs of the students to be able to move around not frequently, hopefully not too frequently, but they are moving around frequently. That's the thing. You can see we have all kinds of data on our website. It is amazing how much they're transferring all over the place and in all directions. It is not, people tend to think of this as a community college to senior college issue. The majority of the transfers are actually not community college to senior. They are the biggest group, but they're not a majority of the transfers. We have people going in every direction, including we have people going from senior colleges to community colleges. And you can see, you look on the website, there's all kinds of data about this. And we, unfortunately, from my perspective, you may disagree, but the way the credit basically works at CUNY, transfer credit, is if it's based on a principle of course matching. You get credit if the course you took at College A matches a course at College B. And it might not match for a variety of reasons. It might not match because a faculty member decides it doesn't match. And there's always, nothing's ever identical, so there are many reasons for courses not to match. And another reason it might not match is because the discipline doesn't even exist at the receiving college. And as our colleges continue to differentiate, that happens more and more. Some colleges have certain languages taught that other colleges don't. And the ones that don't won't sometimes give credit for when a student comes in with the language that isn't taught there. I mean, maybe that seems incredible, but it's true. We know of examples where a science course in a science discipline taught at one college isn't given credit at another college because that science discipline isn't taught on that campus. So, and the students, they take a long time to get their credits evaluated. And while they're getting it evaluated, they may make the wrong choices for courses, and also they may not get financial aid. And sometimes, because of all this trouble, they end up graduating with excess credits. There are many reasons for excess credits. Everybody always goes, but you know, they also get excess credits because X, Y, and Z. Yes, we know that. Okay, we do know that. But sometimes it's because of this whole problem with the lack of transfer of credits. And they don't get financial aid for that. And it takes them longer to get into the workforce. And they may be more likely to drop out because of this, all these problems. So we're trying to figure out how to do it. So let me just say what we have been thinking about, what we're proposing, and then we can hopefully go on to questions and comments and stuff. Because there's been some confusion about this. Guiding principles, we're trying to preserve as much flexibility for campuses as possible. Okay, so there are 3 parts to the curriculum: general education, major, and electives. That's the basic. We tried to figure out, okay, what is the most credits for, if we take the gen ed piece first, which is the most complicated to explain. We tried to figure out what's the most credits that could be in general education that could be done at every college. And we first came up with a number of 36. And then we thought, well, but if a student transfers, you know, right now there's a board policy, which you may not be aware of. It's from 1999, but there's a board policy that says if a student transfers with an AA or an AS degree, they can be required to do at most 1 course of general education at the senior college. Okay, so if they finish here with an AA or an AS and they transfer, they're supposed to be required to do at most 1 additional course of gen ed. By the way, we have discovered in our meetings going around CUNY that there are 2 senior colleges that are requiring significantly more than 1 of the AA and the AS degrees holders, which we think is causing problems on those campuses for those students. But anyway, leaving that aside, given that that's the board policy, we didn't want to make it more complicated under the new system for the transfer students who have AA and AS degrees than is currently the case with the current policy. The current policy doesn't say how many credits it is that you have to take, you could take after you transfer, only that it's 1 course. So again, trying to be as flexible as possible, we thought, well, a course could conceivably be up to 6 credits. It could. So we said, okay, 36 for every college, and then up to 6 credits additional for a baccalaureate program only. And then the idea was that of the 36 would, all we would do is say 36, and then we would have a committee, which would be primarily faculty from around the university, that would decide large divisions of the 36. And I don't even want to give examples of what those divisions might be, because every time I do, people say we've set them already. We haven't set them. We don't want to set them. You know, give me an example of something you might think of. some brave person. Speech. Somebody said speech. Okay, speech, even broader. Well, English and speech, you know, maybe communication, something like communication. Okay, now remember, I didn't say that. You all said that. Okay. Okay, so one might be, yes?
General education, I served on committees very long ago, and to me, it represents something that reflects what students need in this age, as opposed to, say, liberal arts and medicine. And one of the most important things they look at is some knowledge about technology, and that's not in the traditional liberal arts education. Yes. Everybody uses smartphones. I mean, almost it's an indispensable item. Yet they don't even know what transistors. And something that is missing, I'm trying to use that into the Gen Ed program. That was some time ago with her. Okay. I'm the technology block.
I'm not surprised.
I know the technology block, we don't get enough block. Don't harm English. How do you deal with that time that we're willing, as proud as our curriculum is, because of paper regulation, to increase the liberal arts content of the technology program? If it allows for a general technology program to liberal arts.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, here's the point. Here's the point is this committee, this faculty committee, would decide if technology should be in, if other things should be in, but it would be big. It would be big chunks, and then those chunks would be labeled by not particular courses, but by learning objectives. Now, I bet many of you have worked on, for accreditation purposes, Middle States or ABED or whatever. You've worked on learning objectives as the things that are important for defining what the student should know rather than just particular courses. So there would be learning objectives, and this would be decided by the faculty committee. And then a university-wide one with a lot of flexibility in there. And then it would be up to each college to submit courses that it felt met those learning objectives. And so, for example, there might be a technology chunk or maybe quantitative and technology chunk, something like that. And one college might submit all math courses, one might submit math and statistics, one might submit computer science, engineering, as part of it. And it would be up to the college as long as the overall learning objectives were made. So it would be very possible for colleges to have completely different courses that were in their Gen Ed. And it would be possible for colleges to express their individuality. Like there are some campuses that are absolutely dedicated to the teaching of languages other than English. And they would want to make sure that that was in for them. But there are other colleges that do not feel that way. And they would not have to. Okay, so that's the idea, trying to maintain the flexibility. But then for the students, from the students' perspective, if they were to take any piece of this thing, they would be deemed having satisfied that piece of the general education framework for the whole university. And no matter where they moved, they would have done that piece. Okay, so even though the specific courses were different at different campuses. This is very similar to what the Georgia system did. So if you want to look at another example of how, an existing example of how it's done, be Georgia. That's piece number one of the curriculum. Piece number two is majors. For the majors, what we would do there is that we would get faculty together from the largest transfer majors from all over the system, and they would sit and talk to each other, and they would decide on the first 3 to 6 courses that would lead into each major. Okay, this would be similar to the work that has been done, for example, by John Jay College with the community colleges on criminal justice and forensic science and all those that's worked out so well. And the courses leading in, they're not necessarily courses in the major. They may be prerequisites to the major. So for example, nursing, you have to take biology or whatever. So courses like that. And then the third piece is electives, that all electives would transfer. But I just want to add one little piece on this, and then I'll stop with this part of it. That was with the 36, we call that the 36 plus 6. And after talking with some people from the community colleges, it was explained to us that for some of the community college degrees, 36 would be very difficult to fit in, of the AS, particularly of the ASs. So we're now looking at and favoring a model that is 30 plus 6 plus 6. And this is really where people's eyes start to roll, you know. 30 plus 6, which still adds, it still adds to a total of 42 for the baccalaureate programs. And it still adds to 30, the first two parts add to, you can add, okay, 30 plus 6 is 36. Okay, the idea is that the 30 would be the common across the whole university, the framework, just like I described it before with the big chunks and the learning objectives and each campus doing its own courses. Then each campus, every single one, would get 6 credits to use as it wished for whatever it wanted. And this would allow the AS degrees at the community colleges to fit in those 6 in some way that would particularly fit with those AS degrees. And then the baccalaureate programs would get another 6, like I described before. So this would give, we were trying to give just more flexibility. And that's probably enough. You just stop there. So questions, comments? Yes?
There is one thing that is not completely clear to me. Many courses could qualify to be summed up into those 36 credits, right? It's not like that.
Right. Many. Hundreds, thousands. Okay, the question was, many courses would qualify for the 36 credits. Yes, and it would be your decision as to which ones did, and for your campus. And only the 30 credits would need to fit within these learning objectives for the whole university, and 6 of them would just be completely up to you. Okay, yeah.
As an example, if we were talking about an AS in business, that would include some accounting courses, and we had 30 credits of liberal arts, basically, plus 6 credits, which the department, at the college approved, but then 6 credits of that 60-credit program would be courses that would move the students, that would be accepted not just as the major here, but also going to a senior college. In other words, all the 42 credits would be within the associate program.
No. Yeah, no. What it is the courses that were for your major, the major part of the AS degree, the first 3 to 6 of them would be courses that had been agreed on with the other colleges as leading it. Yeah. Let me just see if there's somebody who hasn't. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I teach Spanish in the primary department, and they often, some of our courses for the French 1 and 2, and any language, 4 credits. How do you deal with transferring a credit of 4 credits to a college where they only accept 3 credits? How can you standardize that?
Yeah, we haven't solved that yet, and it's a big problem. Now, it's an even bigger problem. At Staten Island, most of the courses are 4 credits, and so it's a really big problem for them. Plus, lab courses, language courses can be 4 credits. Lab courses can be 4 credits. One possibility is that at least they're talking about this at Staten Island. It might not work here, but if we're in the 30 plus 6 plus 6, which for you, because your community college would be 30 plus 6, the 6 could be used to divide it up and add it to some courses to make 4 credit courses that are within the 30. Okay, I totally confused you. Yeah, you can do all kinds of things with that 6. You know, it's up to you to use it. However, I see that some people are nodding and seem to understand, so maybe they can, yeah, right, okay. Yes, back there.
Georgia, you'll speak to you. I wonder if one of the things that you are looking at is how well upper divisional courses are articulated within the curriculums of the senior colleges, so that at the junior college level, we're preparing them appropriately for those upper divisional placements, to get placement in those courses. Because often the obstacle to transfer, which mysteriously my students don't have at the private colleges. I'm just saying.
Yes, I know.
Putting it out there.
Yes, I know. I know. We're well aware of this.
Is really, you know, the upper divisional course will say more of the same. Well, I don't know what more of the same is. And so, are you looking at the senior college level in terms of the advanced level courses so that they articulate well?
Yes.
Well, I think where that would particularly come to play is within the majors because, yeah, and getting the faculty together to agree on the courses that lead in and how they should articulate. We're doing something right now that is kind of a beginning example of this that I don't know if your math chair is here, but yeah, oh, there, yeah, okay. We're doing, the math chairs have agreed unanimously to, which is a miracle, but they have agreed to get together and get a committee together for the 2 remedial levels of math, so arithmetic and elementary algebra, and to decide together on what the criteria should be for successfully passing arithmetic and elementary algebra, and then leading you into college algebra. So that's a beginning example of what we hope to do, and I think that the math chairs are really setting a really good example and for others. So, yes. Okay, another. Oh. Hi, Phil. We've known each other for quite a while now.
I've served for many years here on our curriculum committee, and brace yourself, it looks like I might have a return. So I've seen more than my fair share of our course syllabi and outlines that specify learning outcomes and objectives. I also served on the committee that set the general education learning objectives that was approved by our learning body. We ask that every course submitted here specify which of those objectives it might have as part of its expected learning outcomes. And we've seen sometimes people are very enthusiastic and they attempt to put down more than actually they could assess through the curriculum of the course. So the modifications that are made. However, every course in our college specifies at least 1, sometimes 4 or 5 of our basic learning objectives. And here's my basic one. Suppose our courses in health and in design draft, in business, have been approved by us as developing critical thinking, maybe quantitative reasoning, etc., different learning objectives that are identified by this group as being in the general ed categories, whatever they may be. We are free then to say that these courses can be used to satisfy those given objectives.
Yes.
But when our students go...
Was this a trick question?
Well, look, in 39 years here, I've seen what happens to our students when they leave us and go to other places. I don't want that to happen again. I don't want whatever we're about to do to fail again.
Me either.
The senior colleges are saying now, wait a minute. We've got our programs, we have our courses, we have our character, and we got to take anything that somebody says in particular.
Yes.
They would then accept a health class or a design drafting class or whatever we said as satisfying their objective. I'm just raising it because you're experiencing even this room the reaction of our colleagues at the senior college to the prospect of this. Comment.
Okay. Thank you for that very stimulating comment. Okay, so yes, there would be at the way we foresee this, but it's where we want to get feedback on this, is that after the framework is set up with the learning objectives, and then the colleges decide which courses they want to fit into that, there probably would have to be some additional approval mechanism that was CUNY-wide and that would have faculty on it. However, what we're worried about, and you're probably worried, is that's an extra layer of bureaucracy, and we don't like, you might be surprised, we actually don't, I don't like bureaucracy. So we'd have to figure out how to do it in a reasonable way. But it would be an agreement. There would be community college people there as well as senior college people there who would be doing these approvals, not just senior colleges deciding whether they accept it. It wouldn't be like that. By the way, I also realized I should say something about timing because this is also not clear to people. Julia's report, which I encourage you to read, which is also up on the website, was issued last October. And so it was really in October last year that we started actively, publicly talking about this. We'd been thinking about it in the central office for quite a while. I suppose for the past 40 years we've been thinking about it. But anyway, the report was issued then. And assuming we do bring a resolution to the board in June, which is what the Chancellor is saying that we're going to do, we figure that the soonest we can have the framework done and have the colleges have picked the courses that they want in the framework and apply to entering freshmen, the soonest would be fall of 2013, which means that then the first students would be transferring in this framework in 2014. And it means that the first students who would be transferring with an AA or an AS degree would be 2015, which is actually 5 years from when Julia's report was released. So that, just to give you some idea, this is a long process. And there will be a good number of years for colleges to develop their piece of it. Let's see, who hasn't? You haven't.
How will you deal with new courses that they may fall into these new competitive rates?
Okay, how will we deal with new courses that fall in? There will be some kind of, the way I see it, a standing body that would review these things as they come in. I also think that we need an annual review procedure of the procedure to see whether it's working and or if it's not working. We also would like to put in some kind of appeals procedure for students so that if they think they're not getting the credit that they should have gotten, they have a place to go. And talk about that. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. Would this system work just for students who transfer before finishing the AA, or would it work for all of them? Because if it worked for all of them, what would happen to the other 24 credits that would automatically transfer and the students would finish in the 6? You know, they have to finish 6 in order to graduate here. Right. If only 36 for sure transfer, what happens to the other 24?
Okay. As I said, students take courses in 3 pieces: Gen Ed, major, electives. What we're trying to do is take account of all of that so that when a student transfers, no matter how much they've done of those 3 pieces, it transfers with them. So if they have done the major or started the major, that will transfer with them. If they've done a piece of Gen Ed or all of Gen Ed, that will transfer with them, and their electives, they would also get credit for. Now, one thing I should address, because some people have said, particularly from the community colleges, have said to us, this is going to make students transfer sooner, all right? We're not at all sure that's the case. We actually think it may have the opposite effect. And this is the reason why. First of all, right now, 2/3 of the students who transfer from a community college to a senior college do it before receiving the AA or the AS. Most of them now are not waiting the whole time and getting their degree before they transfer. Now, what we hear, now this is anecdotal, but what we hear is that a lot of the reason they transfer earlier is because they know they're not going to get credit when they transfer. And so the sooner they get to where they want to end up being at the end of the baccalaureate, the less credit they're going to use and the less lose and the less trouble they're going to have. So we think that it may very well be that if they know their credits are all going to transfer, they'd be more willing to stay. I believe that the evidence tends to suggest this is what's happening with the John Jay partnerships, by the way, that they're staying, they're getting their associate's degree, and then they're transferring because they know everything is going to happen seamlessly. So I think, anyway, that's a real possibility. Okay, another question? Yes.
What does this mean for the AAS degrees? Because a lot of the students in AAS degrees do choose to transfer.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Our data show, and again, it's up on the website if you want to check it out, that a lot of the AAS students are transferring. And as you know, the AAS degree is not, according to New York State, intended to be a transfer degree. They are losing lots of credits when they transfer, lots. We're very concerned about that. We just had a student contact us who had finished an AAS at one of the community colleges, it was not here, and transferred to Baruch, and had a very high GPA, and how many extra credits?
He graduated with 62 credits in an AAS program.
High GPA?
Yeah, well, it was like 3.4, 3.5. That's good GPA. And he went through very quickly. And he did everything right. He listened to his advisor, and he focused, he took all the right classes, transferred to Baruch, and they have now told him he's going to have to do, I think, 90 more credits. And we looked at this yesterday. We actually looked at the Baruch report, the transfer report, and because it's an AAS degree, he doesn't get that transfer guarantee in the board policy, so he has to do a whole bunch more gen ed. And then of his courses, he's in computer information systems. In the major, Baruch accepted only one for actual credit for the major, and all the rest of elective credit.
Okay, so there's a problem. There's a real problem. We have several things we want to do about this. You know, in New York State, the way it's set up for AAS degrees is AAS degrees, by definition, don't have that much liberal arts in them. To the degree that they do have liberal arts, we think that they should be courses from this framework so that they would those at least would automatically transfer. We also think there are some cases where some AAS degrees should become AS or AA degrees instead. Because we found examples of where even colleges will have the same degree as an AAS and an AS, and it's not serving the students well to do the AAS because in very many cases they end up transferring to a baccalaureate and they lose the credits. So those are, and we also think that the advising needs to be improved for the AAS degrees. This student, a good student, was never explained to him that he was going to lose credits if he went to a baccalaureate program. So, yeah, up there.
Nursing up here, we're doing this field joint program with Hunter. So all our credits will be accepted. We've worked through that over the last few years, and it's probably going through Hunter's academic senate next month, early April. And that's really worked well for our students, but it's been a lot of work of trying to agree on credits. And our last course here will be the first course of Hunter. Hunter's agreed to take 3 of our community credits if they are elective. So that will work beautifully for our nursing students. Right. We're hoping to do more of that within nursing homes.
That's really great. You've done that. And you're to be applauded for doing that. So, but see, people then say, why can't we just do that, right? Why can't we do that for all our programs? And the problem is, you've done that with Hunter, right? But there are other baccalaureate programs in nursing well, just one, I guess, just one other baccalaureate program. That's Lehman. Great. So that what you would also need to do. And Lehman and Hunter should do it not only with you, but with every other community college that has nursing, right? And there are actually over 700 undergraduate programs at CUNY. And there are over 23,000 undergraduate courses at CUNY. And so a lot of faculty have very dedicated, gotten together and developed these excellent articulation agreements like that one, like the John Jay Justice Academy ones, and they're great. But to do this for every program, for every campus, and you see, if you look at the data, it is unbelievable. The students are going everywhere. You know, you think of certain feeder things like your students, a lot of them go to Queens College, but they don't just go to Queens College. They go to every senior college. I think I just looked and there aren't so many that go to Lehman or Brooklyn because those are probably the farthest away. But all the other senior colleges, but it's not a handful that are going even there. There's more than a handful, and there are hundreds and hundreds who are going to all the other senior colleges. And they don't necessarily know where they're going to go. This is the other thing that it just drives me crazy when people at certain colleges say, well, students should just get advised that if they're going to go to X baccalaureate program, you know, students at the community colleges, they should just be advised if they're going to go to this baccalaureate program, they should just take these courses that will fit with that baccalaureate program. Well, they don't know they're going to go there. A, they may change their mind as to what they want to do, or their needs, their personal needs may change or something. But B, they may not get into that senior college. The senior colleges have been greatly raising their transfer admission standards, and they're raising them every year, and they may not get in there. So they may have to go to a different senior college. So they don't know. So how do you expect them to, anyway, sorry. I've been doing this more and more lately, and I've got to calm it down, Okay, yes, go ahead.
I think it's a cultural problem in the city.
Speak up, please.
I think it's a cultural problem within City University. Our graduates have excellent relationship with technology, where they take many of our credits well, AAS degrees, and when crack used to exist, we sent many students to them from our AAS, and they graduate with an engineering degree, and they do just fine as engineers have. But it's just within City University, it's a real big problem.
Yes.
So it depends on how much cooperation they're going to be offered. And
yes.
New York Institute offered tremendous cooperation.
Yes, you know that's where I used to work. Yes. It is amazing, isn't it, that what the comment was that when your students transfer to the private colleges in the area, they get a lot more of their credits counted more easily. And yet we're one university, and they're not getting their credits counted often, too often. Many times they are, so I don't want to say that. Yes?
You mentioned earlier the Georgia system, and I think that some people might worry a bit about rigor of some of these courses. I think there's a difference between what Georgia has done and what you're doing. Georgia basically declared that if you take pre-calculus, no matter where it is, you have to stamp it as pre-calculus. And lots of little colleges have sprouted up as, under the board system, as pre-calculus factories. And all of the students go, and they know that it's an easier course there. And they get their credit, and it comes back, and it stands as, equivalent. But it doesn't sound to me like that's what we're saying that we're going to do. And I hear a lot of discussion about rigor, and I definitely have seen in the Georgia system, rigor is compromised by their mandate that the title pre-calculus mean the same thing everywhere. And it doesn't sound to me like that's what we're doing, but you mentioned the Georgia system, and I think that's a distinction between, some of the things that they do there that has caused damage to rigor as opposed to what's being discussed here.
Yeah, yes, well, the way we're approaching this is very much to have the faculty set the standards, the faculty do the curriculum, the faculty choose the learning objectives, and as we described in math, I mean, if we're going to do this, we're getting them together about the arithmetic and elementary algebra. And if that goes well, we could maybe move on to college algebra. We could maybe move on to pre-calculus. And then it'll be faculty setting the standards. And hope, you know, it should be high standards across the university. That didn't occur at Georgia. Well, it's also like SUNY has a system, a gen ed, across the whole university. And we think that we're going to do it better than what they did too. So, okay. You think? Okay, well, yeah, Phil gets the last question then.
You know you're addressing a group of very hard-working faculty who suffer with their students through these injustices.
Oh, I sense another trick question coming.
The problem is not here. No. The current draft proposal and the program you about causes change throughout the system. And there are many faculty who don't like change, particularly if it's impacting what they do. So you go into resistance right there. I know previous attempts to address it. And many of us who've been here for decades know the previous attempts were supposed to work, but they didn't. And they didn't because of anything we did. We cooperated. They didn't work because of where our students were going. To ask us one more time to rework everything we've been doing. We've got about 32 programs. And we don't know if yet another time we're going to exert the effort. We're going to do our best, only to see a similar outcome. Would you entertain?
Uh-oh, here comes.
Yeah. And the next 87 days and counting down. If we could come what we think, because we would have gotten an indication from, you know, where the problem is, that they are more willing to accept that resolution to the transfer problem than this approach, which I think fair is a major change throughout the system and the way you conceive of courses for learning objectives and 9 credits, et cetera. You know, that you approach in so many colleges. Would it be entertained if in 87 days of counting an alternative could be brought into the conversation?
We welcome all suggestions, all proposals, and you know, we really do, because we're trying to figure this out. This is really complicated, and we know it's a big stretch for the campuses. So, and we know it's scary, and we want to try to figure out what's the best way to do it. But what we don't want to do, as I think you understand, is spend another 5 years or 10 years or 20 years talking about it. So, yeah, whatever we're going to do, and like I said, we're open to any suggestions people have, is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect, but we're hoping that it'll be a significant improvement over what we have now.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor Logue. I think we've learned a lot from this interaction, and we'll continue to have discussions on the campus around this initiative.